Hey there. So, I wanted to talk about this idea of intimacy. And the first part that I want to talk about is even just defining what is intimacy, and to clarify that for the purposes of this video, I'm really talking about intimacy in romantic and sexual love relationships. So some of it might be translatable, but I'm not really talking about your relationship with your children or your coworkers. I'm gonna narrow it down for the purposes of this video and talk about romantic sexual love relationships. So what is intimacy? There's a lot of ways that I could answer that question, but the piece I really want to talk about today is that I talk about intimacy being resonance plus polarity. So resonance being more in the realm of celebrating our sameness, like you're a human, I'm a human, I want love, you want love, this is how we're the same. This is like, it's a lot, it's the area that most people are talking about when they say I feel connected, is we're talking about resonance, this place that celebrates the sameness between us. There tends to be a comfort there. There's sort of like we can lean into each other. So that's resonance. And then polarity is more in the realm of celebrating our difference. What's different about us, and how does that support our relationship? How is that fantastic? Why is that a great thing? Even if there are ways in which, like, God, I wish you were a little bit more similar to me in this area. Polarity is when we celebrate the ways that we're different. And there tends to be more energy or spark in polarity. Certainly using the term polarity, often people think about sexual polarity. It doesn't mean that you'll have to actually be having sex or that it's specifically sexual, but there's a tension point to polarity. So there is more of that like energized feeling. It can be a little bit more uncomfortable than resonance. Resonance has a real, it's a softer feeling. It tends to be more comfortable. And polarity can be a little more uncomfortable, but can feel good also, even in the discomfort. So intimacy being, when again, to reiterate what I said at the beginning, as I'm talking about intimacy in sexual and romantic relationships. So for intimacy to be there in romantic sexual relationships, we need both. We need resonance and we need polarity. And my experience is that a lot of couples, both long-term couples or short-term people, even people when they're dating, have a tendency to gravitate to one side or the other. Some people have a tendency to really want to focus on the resonance, like, okay, that's what's important. This is where we get connected. Let's really focus on the sameness and be comfortable with each other. And then other people or couples, you could say, have more of a tendency to put their attention on the polarity. Like, okay, maybe it's the sexual energy is really important, or that's how I know that we're a match, is if there's this energy, and so I really put my attention on the polarity. But again, my experience, both personally and like working with literally thousands of people over the last 15 years, is that if you focus on one side or the other well, let me put it this way. If you focus on one too intensively or to the exclusion of the other, your relationship will suffer. your intimacy will suffer. So again, whether that's a marriage, a very long-term relationship, or even the intimacy in a more short-term or a less committed relationship, your intimacy will suffer if you focus on one to the exclusion of the other. So again, if anybody has any questions about what I'm saying, please bring them. I'd love to actually answer your real life experiences with this, or if there's any place that the terms resonance and polarity either don't make sense or you're curious about them, please let me know. I'd love to clarify. So given that that's true, that there's really this importance on focusing on both, well, actually, before I jump into practices around these, I want to say that probably all relationships have periods of time where we need to give more attention to one or the other. So over time, if you focus on one to the exclusion of the other, your intimacy will suffer. But most of us over time find that we have fallen to one side or the other, or have lost contact in one area more. And to bring harmony or to bring more intimacy, we actually need to focus on one more than the other. Let me see. Laura says, are there good questions to ask early in dating to see if a man is open to these concepts? Let's see. I am less of a fan of bringing that up, maybe more as like a question to figure it out. And I'm more a fan of actually bringing what it is that you want. So especially if a person, man or woman, isn't familiar with these concepts. I mean, there's many ways you could go about this, right? You could get really excited about watching this video together and see how he responds, sort of as a way of bringing the concept. But if he doesn't have the concepts of resonance and polarity, then it's very hard to talk about it. You can get kind of lost in there. But you yourself, I mean, this is a good reminder, no matter what area of relationship we're talking about, is that we create the magnetic field around us. And people will either be drawn to it or they won't. So this is incredibly true in my own relationship, is that I'm partnered with somebody who really isn't into personal growth like in a formal way. Not that we'll never do a workshop together or something like that, but I bring things to him in my own practice and I invite him in. So I would say early in dating, the main thing is really to be yourself. I know that sounds cheesy and cliche, but so often we sell ourselves out early, and then we're like, wonder why we ended up 6 months or 3 years into a relationship and there's not alignment. And most of the time we can trace that back to some way that we sold ourselves out early, and then this person bought into something that wasn't totally true, or we really weren't a match. And so is playing with these concepts personally and really finding what is the response early on, and then trust your gut. Trust your gut, and trust, if you're a woman, trust your girlfriends. If you're a man, trust your guy friends. Like, honest to God, we don't always make the best choices in relationship ourselves. So ask them, first of all, are you bringing yourself or are you holding yourself back? And then also ask them, what do you think about this person? And listen. Because sometimes we'll ask, but then we'll hear an answer we don't like you should dump him. We're like, oh, but the sex is so good, or, oh, but, he only pushes me away because he loves me, or, so I would say listen. So let me talk a little bit more and then see, Laura, if you have any questions about how to actually bring that, or what that means, but I hope that helped a little bit. Let's see. Poco says, what to do if one has sold out early on and things have gotten out of alignment? Well, so I'm definitely taking a zag here on the topic of resonance and polarity, Although actually I would say you can use both of these concepts to get to, first of all, to find out if you can get back in alignment, and then to get back in alignment. So the first really, like if you've gotten out of alignment, most of the time there is a little bit of resonance practice that's needed, because resonance is about being on the same page. So even getting on the same page about polarity, it takes a little bit of resonance practice first. So that would be, and I don't know you, I don't know enough about your relationship to speak really personally to this, but that would be something in line with a practice that I'll give couples sometimes, is to set a time every day and set a timer. So that there's actually a framework around it, right? You're setting some structure for it. And then each person gets a chance. There's a lot of different ways to do this. So some of this is sharing practice. Like it might be that it's a practice of sharing some things that you want to share with the other person, and then their response is literally just to mirror it back, right? This is kind of Imago Dialogue 101. And I'm not going to go super deep into that right now, because you can Google it. I'll actually post a comment so that you can see some examples. But if you've gotten really out of alignment, sometimes you need to really spend that time getting back into, like, there's a lot of stuff I've withheld from you, and you need it reflected back so that you actually know whether you've been hurt or not. And both people need a chance to do that. A practice that I gave a woman recently is a much simpler version of that. And it was just two things. They set a timer for 5 minutes and they went back and forth. So one of them would say, something that I want to share with you, or something I want you to know about me. And they would share that, and then they would say, something I love about you, or something I want to praise or acknowledge you for. And then it would switch to the other person, and they would literally go back and forth. So depending on where you're at, there's a lot of different tools to use for that, but these are resonance tools. So it's actually great, because I wanted to talk about tools. But sharing and getting on the same page, and some of it might be, some of it is historical. It's like, wow, we've gotten out of alignment, and there's a lot of things I haven't shared with you over time. But frankly, couples who have been together a long time and are feeling great can find a lot of value in these practices also. Specifically around, like, giving space for, here's something I want to share with you. And they might be things that are just from your day. They might be new things you've learned about yourself. And then praise practice is incredibly valuable resonance practice. So I would start with like, those are some examples of resonance practice, and then you find out, again, just to kind of complete that for you, Poco, is not only set a time when you're actually doing it, like maybe it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but set a time, we're going to do this every day for a week, or we're going to do this 5 days a week for 2 weeks. And in that time frame is stay totally open to the magic of what will happen when you actually do that. And so, really tell yourself, like, okay, for 2 weeks or for a month, I'm not going to leave this relationship, and I'm not going to make this person wrong for what they want. I'm not going to make myself or the other person wrong for what it is that they're sharing with me or what I'm sharing. And then just keep doing it. Really listen. Gosh, what is this person telling me? And what is it that I really want them to know? And then you find out over that time, because the first couple times it happens, you might be like, whoa, we're totally out of alignment. But over time, find out. Give yourself some container for that. So great question. Thank you. And Laura, I'm glad that helped. Good. So those are really great resonance practices. Polarity practices is a little more challenging to share the specifics without a specific question, but in the broadest sense, polarity practice is one person, And it doesn't matter if you're in a man or male-female relationship, or you're in a female-female, male-male. It doesn't matter who's doing which role, ultimately. But in polarity practice, one person actively relaxes their masculine, or what we might call the structure or the leadership. So one person actively relaxes that part and actively animates what I'm going to call their feminine, which is the willingness to be led and the expression, the energy of the moment. So John Wineland and I have talked about this a lot in terms of the masculine being the structure, and for the purposes of this one, I'm also going to call it the leadership, or the active leadership, if you will, and the feminine being the energy, the expression, or the willingness to be led. And for any relationship, I would say most relationships, it's not 100% true, but most relationships, one person is, it will serve the relationship for one person to animate the masculine more often, and for one person to animate the feminine more often. And that's a very personal, intimate decision, but most people will know, it's like, are we a relationship where really, like when you get really, really honest, it should be 50-50? Or do you know? Do you already know, like, okay, it's that person should animate the masculine more often, and I should animate the feminine more often, and that's what's going to bring the most intimacy, the most fun. It's going to have everybody have the most fun in the relationship. And but then I would say in almost all relationships, again, it's going to be this tiny, tiny little minority percentage where it's truly always one person should animate the masculine, one person the feminine. I have never met a relationship like that, but I want to hold out that they do exist. But is to start to play with that and be willing to really do both. So again, I find, mostly structure just works for people. Structure, again, is the masculine. And inside of that, it lets everybody relax. So is choosing a time period where one person will truly lead and the other will truly follow, but bring their expression. So for the simplicity of my language, I'm going to give the example of a man-woman relationship and making a choice that, for instance, for an evening that is set aside, we're going to say that it's 3 hours or 4 hours, but it's like a particular date night evening, and there's an agreement. The man is going to animate the masculine and the woman is going to animate the feminine. And what that means is that she has to actively relax her masculine. So actively relaxing the part that knows what to do, that could come up with better solutions, and that the man, just for the purposes of this example, is then going to actively animate the masculine. Okay, like I'm going to pay attention and I'm going to lead. I'm going to lead in a way that takes both of us into consideration. I'm noticing what I want, but I'm also paying attention to her. And I can feel like, oh, I said, let's go here. And because she's animating her feminine, she was, a little disappointed. Or she got excited. It's like, okay, that's like the right decision. Or if she's like, meh, like not so interested, like maybe it's a different decision. Or maybe that she feels meh in a moment, but actually when you get there, she's going to love it. And so you hold fast to your plan, right? But you set a time where you play with this. And again, similar to when I was talking about resonance practice, these are practices. Nobody does them perfectly. And so both people really need to take on not making the other person wrong and really trusting that they're doing their best. So really taking on like he's leading his best, and I'm going to bring my response and my energy about it. And that might be like meh or frustration or disappointment or like irritation, but I'm going to bring it with love because I know that he's doing his best and that it's my expression that allows him to course correct or to have feedback in it. And it's the same, you know, she's doing her best to bring that and to not muddy your practice with this criticism or this like telling each other how they should be doing the masculine and the feminine. So that's more in the polarity practice. And there's so many ways. You could do it for 5 minutes. You could do it for 3 hours. You could do it for a whole date. I mean, there's tons and tons of practice. And again, John Wineland and I lead, you know, weekend intensives or 6-month programs where we can like really fine tune this to you. But in its basic format, it's choosing one person to animate the masculine and one person to relax the masculine and animate the feminine. We just check in. Luke said, we've only ever played with me embodying the feminine. She's unwilling to animate the feminine expression as far as expression and flow energy. Well, I don't know you and I don't know your partner, so I can't say 100%. In one sense, I would say that comes down to a choice, which is that okay with you? Are you okay? Maybe you have a short-term relationship and that's just a fun way to play and it's totally okay. Maybe you're in a long-term relationship and you're like, man, this isn't going to be okay for like 10 years. Given that you're asking the question, I intuit that it's not 100% okay with you. And I would really, I would say the first place to look at that is looking at the underlying, why is that? Probably she's bringing a lot of her past forward, and there's something that's very, there's something that's very unsafe for her in that. The only place, since you're the one asking the question, in some ways I can only really speak to you, which is there any way, I would say two things. One is there any way that you can support her? And it doesn't mean you have to do it, right? There might be some useful modality that she could go practice in that would support her in working with whatever she's bringing forward from her past. That has her totally unwilling to do that. And the other is looking at, is there any way that you could be more trustable for her? So again, not knowing you personally, it's a little hard to say what that is. But if you've been willing to do it for 12 years, maybe this works really well for you. That kind of habit between a couple, it takes a lot of intention. I would say it takes a lot of attention and a lot of intention to unwind something like that. So I would encourage you, probably together and maybe also a little bit separately, to look to someone that you trust if you want to unwind that. And again, in my experience, most relationships need some flow between them. But it says you've answered my question 12 years, so I hope that was helpful or to somebody else as well. So the reason, in conclusion here, again, if there's any other questions, we've got about another 5 minutes. Feel free to bring them forward. And the reason that I really wanted to speak to this is that it's rare for people to really distinguish between resonance and polarity in their relationship. Most often, people just come from a space of complaint. Something's not right. And a lot of times people stay right at that level, something's just missing, or I don't feel it, or no. And it's really at this high level. And you've got to drop lower than that. What is missing? What is it truly that you're wanting? And then there's real value in distinguishing, is it in the realm of resonance or is it in the realm of polarity? Maybe it's a little bit in each. But that's why I wanted to distinguish these, is so that hopefully inside your own self, you could begin to distinguish, the the pieces of what you're truly longing for. And you can always start with the complaint, because a complaint is just a hit. It's just a desire masked. So anywhere that you feel a complaint in your relationship is a great place to take a look and go like, well, what is it I want? And keep taking that question deeper. Take it into, is it resonance or is it polarity? And then take it into like, okay, how would I know if that was met? What would I be feeling? What would my partner be doing? What might be happening? And then that's a place where you can really look at like, okay, where can we meet that? But the other part is that I often see in relationships, there's some awareness that we need both, but we try to do both all the time. Instead of saying like, okay, this is where we're going to build our resonance, and now over here we're going to build our polarity. Because it's not that they don't ever go together, but it's rare. Most of the time, it really supports to acknowledge like, okay, now we're doing something that builds our resonance, and now we're doing something that builds our polarity. And then, of course, sometimes we're just like getting shit done in the world, which isn't necessarily building either, but can be necessary, right? Like maybe you have kids and it's just like, well, you're just getting the kids out the door. But the more that you can put conscious attention on both the resonance and the polarity in your relationship, the more that your intimacy will deepen. So let's see, Arthur says, Luke, A Man's Guide to Women by the Gottmans. Okay, great. I haven't read that book, so I can't affirm or confirm or deny that. There's definitely a lot of good stuff out there, and that sounds like it could be a good one. So feel free to, whether you're, if you're watching the replay, you can also add your questions to the comments, and I'll come back and continue to address any pieces that were either unclear, or if you do have specific questions about your relationship. I love specific questions. The more you can say, I do this and they do this, I'm wanting this, how do I get this? I want to have this particular conversation and I don't know how. I love those questions. If any of them feel too personal for the comment thread on public Facebook page, then feel free to send me a personal message. And thanks so much for watching. I love you.